So we spoke so much on the female consumer, on the woman who drive buying, drive shopping, drive consumer decisions, drive how brands basically can act today. Now basically we have this panel with really a world-class set of experts on the question of female consumers. And I see the panel is just walking down, our dear panelists. I think you had a good preparing talk. And I'd like to call on stage first Susanne Remke. Have a warm applause to Susanne Remke. Could we have a mic for Susanne? Oh, yeah. So Susanne, you're holding this panel, but Susanne, you're the head of Burda New York's office in the Big Apple.
Right.
Yes,
right.
And so you spend most of your time in the United States.
I do.
Yes, and you are also working with Focus as a...
I'm the New York correspondent of Focus magazine as well, so I do reporting in the field. Yeah.
And we were happy. Also, Susanne has been, over the last DLDs, a wonderful moderator, friend, and helped us to connect to many of these very interesting innovators, basically.
Always my pleasure.
Always your pleasure. And today you speak about the female consumer, but it's also a topic that you have thought of a lot. Is that right? You told me
It is.
before.
It's a very big topic in the United States, and I think it's just coming up here in Germany. There's been a couple of books published in the States already, and I think the wave is just coming here. So we are right at the beginning of a very, very cool session here.
It's a cool session in hot Munich.
It is hot, yeah.
And Susanne, the floor is
It
yours.
is.
Please introduce your panelists.
So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. It's great to be here, and I have to say I'm very proud to be part of this. This is a fantastic, fantastic conference. Yeah. Women want more. In this session, we are going to talk about the elusive female consumer. Who is she really? What does she want? Why does she want it? And what's the right way to approach her? Figuring out females is not easy, and I readily admit that, especially since the status of women has changed so dramatically over the last 30, 40 years. However, today's market power is primary female, and I'm not sure if everyone knows that here, but in the US, women already make 80% of all the consumer purchasing decisions. And women buy 60% of all new cars. Think about that. 60% of all new cars in the US are bought by women. And then think about the car commercials. Do they target women? Are there women in there? No, it's all targeting men. There are many categories. Female consumers are basically the 80% minority. They are either being vastly ignored, they are being stereotyped, or depicted as flawed human beings who are fat, who have bad hair, who need creams for their wrinkles, who have a constant headache. And in this panel, we are going to find out how to change that. And we don't want to change that because it's just PC, because it's the right thing to do. It needs to be changed because it's good for the bottom line. It makes money. Targeting women makes money. So I'm going to introduce my panelists. Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers is responsible for user experience at Search Engine Google, and he'll tell us all about the different user experiences of male and females on the internet. Then we have Kate. Kate, come on stage. Kate Sayre is a global marketing expert with the Boston Consulting Group, and she co-authored the book Women Want More, which is, by the way, being published in Germany in July under the title Zielgruppe Frau. Welcome. From Kate, we'll find out what women really want. And then we have Luciana Broggi. and I pronounced that right. She is Vice President, Chief of Staff for PSG Hewlett-Packard, and she knows how to successfully approach women.
We try.
We try. And then we have Alex Kelleher. He's a psychologist and founder and CEO of Cognitive Match, which creates world-class targeting software. He knows a lot about the psyche of women, why we shop, what we shop. And last but not least, I want to introduce Andrew Robertson, President and Chief Executive of BBDO, Advertising Network of the Year at Cannes, and the world's most awarded agency network. So here's what's gonna happen. Andrew is going to give us a 15-minute challenge, and then we'll jump right into the discussion. Okay, that's the plan. So everyone have a seat, please. And Andrew is gonna start. I think you need a mic, right? Yeah, you'll get number 2.
Thanks very much. Thank you. So it's great to be here. I always love DLDs. As the day wore on, I started to formulate a philosophical conundrum in my mind, which is a variation on the old French one. But if a man is in a forest and voices an opinion, and there isn't a woman to hear him, is he still wrong? Yes. I want to talk a little bit about the differences in the way men and women use the internet. I got into this because about 25% of my business worldwide is now digitally based. And I realized that most of the people who are creating the work, creating those experiences for consumers are actually men, even though in reality, the World Wide Web has actually become the World Wide Women's Web. As you've heard already today, there are more women using the internet than men in all of Europe and across North America, and the lines are about to cross in China and India. 63% of all online purchases are made by women. Those women who are online spend longer online than men, and it absolutely is a woman's medium. There's a show called What Not to Wear, which is a variation of this, is What Not to Do. And this is what not to do, which is what Dell did. Their solution to women being important was to create a site called Della and paint it pink. And rightfully, I hate Dell, rightfully, they were absolutely slammed in the blogosphere for their wonderfully helpful tips, like you can use your computer to track your workouts and see how much weight you're losing and stuff like that. But they eventually withdrew it. And I took great pleasure in reading all of these really nasty comments about Della. And I was a little bit surprised when I found this one buried amongst them. I found this extremely helpful, talking about Della. And then she went on to say, I've decided to buy a Mac, which made me feel good. So the fact of the matter is, women and men are clearly very different. Do I have to click twice?
I want to start with men's brains. All right, now men's brains are very unique. Men's brains are made up of little boxes. And we have a box for everything. We've got a box for the car. We've got a box for the money. We've got a box for the job. We've got a box for you. We've got a box for the kids. We've got a box for your mother somewhere in the basement. We got boxes everywhere. And the rule is, the boxes don't touch. When a man discusses a particular subject, we go to that particular box, we pull that box out, we open the box, we discuss only what is in that box, all right? And then we close the box and put it away, being very, very careful not to touch any other boxes. Now, women's brains are very, very different from men's brains. Women's brains are made up of a big ball of wire. And everything is connected to everything. The money's connected to the car's connected to your job, and your kids are connected to your mother, and everything's connected to everything. And it's like... It's like the internet superhighway, okay? And it's all driven by energy that we call emotion. It's just... It's one of the reasons why women tend to remember everything. Because if you take an event and you connect it to an emotion, it burns in your memory and you can remember it forever.
So if you take an event and you attach it to an emotion, burn it together with an emotion, you'll remember it forever. Absolutely true. Now, there's a reason for all of this. This is a rather limp rendition of the brain. The hippocampus, I'm told, is the part of the brain that is responsible for memory and emotion. And the hippocampus in women is significantly larger than it is in men. This, by contrast, is the amygdala, I'm told, which is the part of the most primitive part of the brain, which is why it's nearly twice the size in men as it is in women. And this controls the fight or flight instinct more than anything else. So there is I'm told, a reason why our brains work in different ways. I wanted to find out what the big differences in behavior were that were driven by these differences. And the first one is this. Men, and this is true when they're using the internet, are all about scoring points. They're all about scoring points. As an example of some great work that leveraged this, this is a launch for the Golf GTI, which was done entirely using an iPhone app.
They launched Real Racing GTI. The game embodied everything GTI fans love about the car: innovation, performance, and style. Users shared their fastest laps by posting videos on YouTube, and an online leaderboard tracked global player rankings. In the showroom, players found a gallery and full specs on the new Mark 6. Using the iPhone's GPS function, fans could easily locate the nearest dealer and schedule a test drive.
Men like scoring points. Women like building relationships. So men use the internet to score, women use the internet to build relationships. They like to listen to what other women have got to say, other people have got to say. They like to have a voice. They like to empathize, be emphasized with. If you look at Facebook, it's very interesting that 57% of Facebook's users are women versus 43% for men. If you dig a little deeper, what you find out is that on average, they both have the same number of friends, about 130. But women post more than 55% more than men. They use the internet and social media as particular as a way to build relationships and maintain relationships. It's also particularly true of mothers, the Worldwide Mothers Web. In the US, I think 69% of women, of online mums, go to more than one social networking site during the course of last year. And it explains why sites like Baby Center are so very successful. Baby Center is owned by Johnson & Johnson. It has 16 million users in 21 countries, 8 million in the US alone. And it works because it's useful. It works because it helps women do more of what they wanted to do anyway, which is to hear about, talk to, listen to, learn from other, in this case, mums. So that's the first big difference. Men are about scoring points, women are about building relationships. Men consume on the internet, women create. If you look at the amount of video viewed online, it's much, much higher for men. Compare that to the amount of posting that goes on Facebook, for example, which is evidence of women's desire to create rather than consume. Big difference. Men live in the world of fantasy, and as Sayre said earlier, women live in the world of reality. 84% of all games players are men. What a surprise. Women, as I said, live in the world of reality. They use it for what is most useful right now, today. This was an interesting finding. 40% of men feel more attractive online. The more interesting fact is that 100% of women agreed. This is a fun example that was done for Old Spice to show just how extreme this desire to live in the world of fantasy is.
When you search for yourself online, would you like to see your name show up more than 0 times? Well, unfortunately, it doesn't. Because you're just a normal, boring guy who's boring and normal.
To illustrate the transformational power of Old Spice swagger, SwaggerizeMe.com allows users to enhance their online swagger by creating fictitious articles, blogs, and web...
Oh, it's frozen. So basically what it does is you put in your name and a photograph of yourself, and it creates a whole load of fictitious articles about wonderful things that you've done. And then when you Google yourself, all of those fake articles come up. Men live in the world of fantasy, women live in the world of reality. It's a really, really clever idea. Men are all about the destination, women are about the journey. Men are very linear. They go from the beginning through the middle to the end. Women set out, enjoy the different stages of the journey, are quite happy to divert onto other journeys and come back to that eventually, 3 or 4. I mean, sometimes it's interesting, some shopping sites will stay open for 11 hours. I've seen data that people are staying on the site. They're obviously not on it for 11 hours. They keep it open for 11 hours and go to lots of other sites. To illustrate this, men are, as we know, they're good on destinations. They never ask for directions. Men never ask for help on anything. But if they are given instructions, they follow them. This is an example of this that we did for Gillette to help improve.
Taking care of the hair down there certainly has its benefits. You might say when there's no underbrush, the tree looks taller. Before you start, think about the unique topographical features under your hood. With the right...
We're freezing. Basically, it's just a step-by-step instruction on how to shave down there. And it's been viewed over 5 million times. Straightforward destination. Here's what you got to do. 1, 2, 3, 4. Get out. Would never work with women. So, my conclusion, having done all of this work, was that the worldwide women's web is just like the offline world, only more so. Those fundamental differences between women are just more extreme online. Men are into scoring points. Women are into building relationships. Men live in the world of fantasy, women live in the world of reality. Men, it's all about the destination. Women enjoy the journey. That is as far as I got. Thank you.
So I'd like to start out with Kate next to me. She did extensive research on the female consumer for her book, Women Want More. And we really want to know, what do women want?
So in a word, what women want is more time. There's been a dramatic increase in the participation of women in the workforce. Women are going to add $5 trillion of earned income to the economy. And this is because there are more women graduates from university in Europe. And in the US, women represent 60% of the advanced degrees. And so with this higher education level comes higher earnings. Women also control $12 trillion of spend, which is what the roughly 80% translates to. And remarkably, companies are doing a terrible job of recognizing this power that women have. And companies are not thinking about how can we make the product simpler, how can we make the purchase process easier. One of the reasons that women overwhelmingly shop online is because it's quick. And these are all the trends that we see in terms of winning the women consumer. Make it easy, make it good value for money, and make it time-saving.
Can you give us an example of something that really worked for women, a product that they really loved?
Sure. So when we wrote the book, we did a survey of almost 20,000 women worldwide, and we asked them about their favorite brands. And we also profiled companies that were doing extremely well with women. And a lot of the answers were counterintuitive, because many of the companies we saw that were doing well with women were not explicitly targeting women. They were simply making intuitive products with very good product design. So you mentioned Apple. Apple came out as one of the favorite brands, and yet consumer electronics came out as one of the least favorite categories. Now, if you talk to women about why they like Apple, it's because they don't have to read the instructions. It's an intuitive product. You can pick it up. You can figure it out. If you have an iPhone, it makes your life infinitely easier, and it saves a tremendous amount of time. Another interesting company, and we'll talk about why targeting women is so important for the bottom line, is Westin. Westin is one of the hotel brands of Starwood. It has been the fastest growing and most successful part of Starwood. And Westin started out by saying, you know, there are more women in the workforce, more women are traveling for work. We really need to understand the needs of the women consumer. And so they did a little research, and what they found out is that women are overwhelmingly stressed. And in particular, women that have jobs and have children at home are particularly stressed when they're on the road. And so if you asked about what women wanted when they went to a hotel, I want relief from the stress. Now, here's a perfect example of a company that then didn't go out and make the room pink. What they said is, what can we do to make this as restful an experience as possible? And they came out with Westin stands for wellness. And so they started by redesigning the bed, creating the heavenly bed, which gives you a better night's sleep. They also overwhelmingly upgraded the quality of the sheets to have a much higher thread count. So they had the best sheets in the industry. They went through the room service menu, and they said, how can we make lighter, healthier fare? They went through the gym, and they said, how can we design a quick, targeted workout within this? They redid the bathroom. Before Westin started looking at this, the number of hotels that actually included conditioner in the bathroom were about zero. Now, any woman can tell you, you need the conditioner.
Right.
And simply by adding a 25-cent item, it created tremendous loyalty with women. Now, what's interesting about all of this is every one of these steps that was done in response to women's concerns, the sheets, the towel, the conditioner, the gym, the lighter food, women drove incredible loyalty, but interestingly, Westin then started scoring off the charts with men, because although men couldn't tell you they cared about the sheets, when they got to this white, restful, completely relaxing room and relaxing experience, they really liked it. And so this is why women, because they control so many of the purchases and because they're so time constrained, no one likes to waste time. Men don't like to waste time either. And so if you can meet the needs of the women where time is even more of a premium, you satisfy the men as well, and that drops tremendously to the bottom line.
Thank you. Alex, you're a psychologist, and an expert on gender-based targeting. You work with companies like Yahoo and Net-a-Porter. So you know why women shop the way they shop. And we already saw two pictures of brains. So tell us what's going on in our brains.
So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the brain without the diagrams. I'll have to point to my head, so bear with me. But I'm also going to talk about whether gender is a useful concept online particularly. So I'll come back to that, but keep that in mind while I'm telling you some of this stuff. And actually, if you look at female and male brains, the differences are, refreshingly in many ways, aren't that huge. But there are a few key differences which Andrew certainly touched upon earlier. And the ones that I find particularly fascinating in terms of telling, interesting behavioral differences between the genders, I'll just run you through a couple now. So in terms of the brain itself and the real kind of infrastructure of the brain, there are areas that control different things like speech and vision and people's kind of propensity to react to color. So if we look at speech, firstly, there's an area of the brain called the posterior temporal cortex, and it's about here in your head. And it is, as much as you can locate anything in the brain, it's the center of language. And if you look at the brains of women versus men, women have a far higher density of neurons in that area. Now, it's maybe too simplistic to say women are therefore better at language, but it certainly does translate to a female sort of ability with language and sort of love of more kind of interesting and complex language. And we certainly see that online when we look at how people respond to marketing messages. The messages with more interesting and complex language get responded to better by women. So direct benefit essentially from how our brains work. So two more I want to bring up. One is something to do with how we view the world around us and images. And there's another area of the brain where for men,
and it's the inferior parietal lobe, in case you're interested. And in men, it's an area that's enlarged. And men, it turns out, are much better at dealing with complex three-dimensional shapes, and they respond to them much better when they see them. And again, it's worth saying that everything I say is in the context of sort of statistical relevance. So I'm saying that most women's brains are like this, and most men's brains are like that. And that's actually, will tie back to what I'm about to say about whether gender is important or not. So the third one, and I think in some ways the most kind of powerful and direct one that I'm going to mention about the differences in brains is color, the perception of color. And I don't think it'll come as a surprise to anybody in this room that women tend to be better at or at least more, or, you know, I think somebody mentioned earlier today how much more colorful this room is, since it's a female conference, and I think that that's a real reflection of women's brain's ability to see color. So two things there. 8% of men around there are colorblind, so that's a difficulty to distinguish between shades of red and green, versus 1% of women. And that has something to do with where the colorblind genes are located. They're located on the X or Y chromosome. So if you're missing that extra piece, you're much more likely to have this condition. So immediately there you get a sort of less sensitivity in almost 10% of the population to color. The other thing is they just recently discovered that women have potentially a fourth kind of cell, so 3 colors, and a fourth kind of cell in the eye which responds to color. It's called tetrachromatic because of that. And what that means is that up to about 20% of women can see millions more shades of color than men. So they can appreciate the distinction between one shade of blue and another shade of blue. So, you know, already we have quite a few important distinctions with how the brain works in terms of just processing language, hugely important with the web, processing images, whether it's 2D or 3D, and processing color. And it's fascinating because they've done a study in the UK quite recently, and they've looked at women's response to websites designed by women and men's response to websites designed by men. Really simple. And there's a huge difference in how women respond. And by response, I actually mean entering the site, moving around it, potentially buying products, so straight to the bottom line, to your earlier comment. So these things have really direct and immediate benefits. But rather than dwell on those differences, what I want to bring it back to for the internet and for what I do and have done every day for 10 years or so, looking at how people behave online and what gender means there. Typically, with what we do, we don't know whether the person at the end of the line is a man or a woman. We're making assumptions based on what we see them do and what we see them respond to. And then on those assumptions, we're deciding what do we show to them that's more relevant. But just to give you an example of how this can go wrong, there's a big advertising network. We work with Yahoo, as you know, and other companies. And one of these big networks, I won't tell you which one it was, after quite a lot of observing my behavior, is convinced that I'm a woman over 55. So read into that what you will, and maybe that's why I got invited to this event. But that's, you know, interestingly, and I don't actually know why that was. Maybe it's because we have a lot of female brands as our clients, and I spend a lot of time looking at those websites. But I didn't feel like that advertising network was getting it wrong for me. I actually probably thought it was quite relevant given what I was trying to do at the moment, look at our clients and their competitors. So that to me is just a really clear example of how gender online, it doesn't matter if I think you're a woman but you're actually a man, or the other way around, if what I'm giving to you is relevant to you as an individual. So this concept of gender is useful for us internet guys when we do stuff online, but it may not directly transfer to whether somebody is a female or a male. It may just be the way, are they behaving like a female or a male?
Right.
And to me that's a really fascinating side of this whole argument is, you know, where the lines cross and where you end up with this concept of femininity.
There was one interesting thing you told me when we talked before. You said that women tend to buy round objects. Why is that? I found that very, very cool.
So this is a startlingly clear response and difference. So back to Andrew's slide on the amygdala, which is a couple of prune-like little centers in the brain that deal with emotional response to things, including fear. And if you just watch women, and to some extent men actually, but women mainly, looking at objects that either have rounded corners or have straight lines. So you can show them the same thing, so a watch with rounded edges or straight edges.
Let's say like a mobile phone. You'd have
Or a mobile phone, exactly.
Like the iPhone, which has round edges, and one of the older mobile phones that have those sharp edges.
Perfect example. So if they're looking at a phone without rounded edges, there'll be a fear response in the amygdala, so it'll light up. It's like fireworks. And if you ask them if they felt anything, they'll go, no, I'm just looking at this straight phone.
So they'll say they don't like it, but actually they are scared of it.
Actually, yeah, actually they're scared, but at a really fundamental, sort of, historically very important level that they're not conscious of. But that will inevitably influence their purchase decision. So it's no surprise that Apple has, if you look at their website, if you look at iTunes, if you look at iPhone, there's a lot of rounded corners there.
So for everyone out there who produces consumer goods and wants to target women, round edges. Round edges, very important. So, thanks, Alex. Thank you. Steve, we've talked about tangible consumer goods, and now we move on to Google and the internet. And I wonder if on the internet, with a search engine and the experience of a search engine, is there a difference between men and women? Do you have to target women specifically in some sort of way to get them to your site?
So, it's an interesting question, because one of the things that in fact happens at Google is that we don't. So we don't specifically target women, we don't specifically target men. I think that probably anyone who's used Google, and I would expect most people in the room who've used Google, will know and will recognize is that Google as a site changes very little and has changed very, very little over the years. That doesn't mean it hasn't changed. In fact, it changes up to 100 times every year, but the changes are very, very subtle. Those changes tend to be entirely data-driven. That means that what we do is that we will see whether a change that we make has an impact on the overall effectiveness of the site, on the overall effectiveness of Google. And one of the interesting things there that we've talked about a little bit is that when we do the research, what will happen is that we will, of course, make sure that we get as much as possible a balanced number of people who are respondents to any research that we're doing, so an equal number of men, women, so on, also obviously a good age spread and so on. But in fact, we then collapse the data because we're not, or specifically not looking to target one or another demographic. What we're looking to do is provide a service which is as universally usable, as universally accessible as absolutely possible. If we're successful, difficult to tell. But if we look at the fact that of the approximately 70% of the population in the UK, in the US, that is online, approximately 70% of those, depending upon when we're looking at, is using Google, and the fact that that's split relatively equally, men and women, which also roughly maps onto the universe of the internet in the US, which is as close as possible to 50-50 as you can get, then it seems that we are reasonably successful in that. If you look at Europe, it's a very similar story. So for us, for search specifically, we don't make a difference. We specifically don't make a difference because we feel that the service that we're offering is already, as far as possible, universally useful.
Mm-hmm. But you also told me that this might change in the future, perhaps, especially if you look at developing countries, right?
Yeah, it becomes very, very different if you look at places outside the developed world. It's also very different if you look at the way women approach technology and the way women feel about technology. In fact, some of the research that we've done shows that women tend to, and we've heard this earlier today as well, women tend to play down their level of ability. So if you ask women if you ask them questions about any technologies, they're likely to express that they have less ability than men will. But in fact, if you then go and measure that, it's absolutely not true. Absolutely not true. It's simply being possibly slightly self-deprecating on the part of the women. In fact, if we look at the developing world, then it's possible that it will flip the other way, because there's an interesting phenomenon which occurs, and which is that if you have a schooling system, and developing world, thank God, is now in most cases has some form of schooling systems, what is happening is that the people in those schools are being taught to read and write, and very often now being taught to use technologies. If a family has some form of stress and is looking to increase the income for that family, what they're most likely to do is pull the male child from school and get the male child to contribute to the family's income. What that means is, in fact, that the women in the developing world are likely to end up the more literate and therefore the more technically savvy than the men.
So your future consumers.
So our future consumers in the developing world, it's in fact likely that the women are more likely to be tech savvy than men.
Yeah, that's a very interesting fact. I really like that one. Thank you, Steve. Thanks. So, we're moving on to Luciana. HP has been working in the women's area for quite some time, and you did not develop a pink product.
We did, actually. And, pretty interesting because, so first of all, if I can say one thing, in technology, first of all, women are now targeted by everybody, but actually the women market has been a huge and immense market since ever, right? Maybe less in the front end, but in the influencing role, women have played a very strong role, since the beginning of the world, I would say. I would say now they are probably the final decision makers more than they were in the past, but the influence of women on decisions has always been very intense. In the technology world, the numbers we have for Europe, at least, is that it's still a 50% women versus men final decision in terms of buying technology. But unfortunately, it's a choice. A lot of women that buy, because they are a little bit insecure about their knowledge about technology, that's what Steve was saying before, they still ask for advice from men in a lot of cases. And that is in most of the cases, a risk, because a lot of women tell us, we were not sure because we don't understand technology very well, and that's mainly a responsibility of the vendors that make technology complicated, to be honest. We ask for advice, but usually men advise based on what they need, not based on what women need. And therefore, a lot of women tell us, we ended up with the most powerful machine, the biggest screen ever, but that was absolutely not what we wanted. And this machine was so heavy, we can't carry it around, right? And that's really a challenge.
That was actually me. We talked about that before. Yeah.
No, but it's really true. We get it from a lot of women. At the same time, when the people in the design labs of HP told me, we need to have a pink PC, I can tell you, it was a nightmare to me. I said, no, please, this is the worst stereotype you can think about, right? I hate the pink PC, don't buy a pink PC. In reality, I've been proven wrong, because it's been the best bestseller of the mini line actually has been the pink color, despite what I thought. So it is true. And again, I think that it's very dangerous. My conclusion on all of this is that it's very dangerous to put people, women or men, in boxes. What I like, based on what Alex just said, is I think there are behaviors, and for sure, most women, if you want to say it like this, have a different behavior in the way they use the web, in the way they communicate. Definitely one area we didn't talk a lot about, but is extremely strong from what we see, is the in-store experience, so really the buying experience. In the world of technology, one of the things that really puts off women a lot is when they go in one of the big retailers and they find 50 different products and no help to understand which one is doing what and how can I choose, right? This is also a very important part that is quite different between women and men. As we said, men go for a destination. They are in most of the cases, they come into the store knowing what they want. Women usually come to the store with a more open mind, and they are seeking advice from the people in the store, from other consumers. They come with more humility also in front of the choice. So those are also big differences we have seen. One good experience we had is, thinking about designing a product for women, with a woman. So we had an experience with Vivian Tam, which was a fashion designer. And it was very, very interesting because we went through the design phase. We had a second product now. And we went with her through the whole phase of design. And what I liked very much about it is that she didn't look only at the color, which is usually, the easy thing, so we do it pink. But she went through all the design experience, starting from the material we used, the feeling of the touch, the way the keys on the machine were positioned, ending up with a design that really went through all the different way of experiencing the product and using the product. Because for women, and I think Kate said it, and a lot of people said it, is really up to the experience. What you do with the thing. Not really the product itself, but what you do with that. And interesting enough, one of the things Kate said, is saving time and being more effective, being faster. When we went through an analysis, a survey with women, the top priority for women came out as being freedom. And I was very surprised about that because I said freedom, Western Europe, you think is something that we take for given. Actually, freedom is free time for me, right? How can I get more free time? What I can do things I like to do in an easier way, in a faster way, and that's where the web is extremely important because it gives me, even in a very short period of time, the possibility to do something that before I had to take a long time to do. So those are the main findings we got to.
Thank you. Thanks. So I think we started out with the idea that there is one women's segment out there, but that's not true. It's not like 50% of humanity segment. Women are very, very different things, right?
No, not right. No, there are two broad behavior patterns, each of which is characterized mostly by one gender, is I think where we got to.
But within women? Within the women's segment, there is not one
My
woman.
hypothesis is that the four differences that I identified are true of most women and most men.
So, Luciana, back to you. HP came out with a spring collection recently, and this ties in with the Dell disaster. So HP comes out with a spring collection despite the Dell disaster, and they targeted females with their tech products, and you tied it in with the movie Sex and the City too. So why did yours work? Why did your tech collection work, and why did Dell?
We have to say that in any case, in the last 10 years, I've been in this industry for almost 20 years now, but in the last 10 years, the PCs transformed themselves from being a piece of technology to become an accessory, right? So that's where the spring collection is not really a surprise. Actually, in the PC industry, probably not a lot of people know it, but we have 4 collections a year, exactly like fashion. And products have a life cycle of 3 months, right? So it's one of the fastest industry today. Probably the only comparable one is fashion, actually. And the reason why, for me, it's very hard to comment on the Dell experience. I think fundamentally at the origin was a good idea. Let's talk to women, with something that is interesting to them. The risk, as we said before, is when you get into stereotypes. And you think, I slightly disagree with what was said before, because I think there are probably women that were interested in what Dell was trying to tell them, but not all the women, and some women even felt kind of offended by the fact that we're only addressed by, fashion, makeup, and these kind of things, right? Maybe if the approach had been more, let's talk to women about everything, among other things can also be, losing weight, because that's even men are interested in losing weight, right? So it's more the question of getting into stereotypes rather than saying, how do we give women something they're interested in? And we do hope that people will like the spring collection, but again, it's not only for women, it's women and men.
I think Alex wants to.
Yeah, I just want to sort of, what that makes me think is that gender isn't necessarily the most important predictor always. We were having this conversation earlier. Sometimes your location, there's lots of geographical location targeting tools out there now. Sometimes that's the most important thing. Sometimes it's the time of day. Sometimes it's the local weather. We find that to be very predictive. And for you guys at Google, when you have somebody's intent, which is what they've searched for, so I want to buy a ... That's probably the most predictive thing about how you should market or which product you should market to them. So gender then becomes a second or third tier sort of predictor, I guess.
Right. But Kate, if you want to market to women, from your research, what do the companies have to do? It's about a clear message.
It's about a clear message. It's about making the product very simple, making the acquisition process simple, and fundamentally providing good value for money. Because women do 80% of the purchasing, they don't have the time to invest in researching every possible option. The reason the man can research the TV is because it's the one category he's really engaged in. And he can spend 10 hours online looking at every single model and be very directed when he goes into the store. And I'm sure I'm oversimplifying, but women are buying many, many categories. And so you need to get your message out quickly, simply, good value for money, because women are going to decide where they trade up and where they trade down. And brand becomes very important within this. Brand is important for most women, not necessarily because of what the brand stands for in and of itself, but it's of the experience of the brand and the consistency and the trust that you have in that company to deliver on what the brand promises. And we talked about H&M. H&M was mentioned earlier. H&M came up as one of the favorite companies. What's interesting about H&M is that they are very consistent in what they offer. They offer something that is fashion forward at a cheap price. And what they've done is take away the risk of, I'm not spending a lot of money on something that's going to be out of style next year. I don't have to worry about that. I know that it's not going to cost more than 20 euros. If it goes out of style, who cares? And it's very, very consistent in terms of how they've delivered on that. Now, I would disagree. I think, obviously, every segmentation has men and women in it. And when you just look at women, there are significant differences by life stage and by income that we see. But overwhelmingly, it is about who's making the purchase, what are they looking for, and are you providing a superior experience?
Mm-hmm. I really wonder if there are differences between Europe and the US, and you work on both continents, and we chatted a little bit about it earlier, and I think there is a big difference, right?
Well, not on those 4 dimensions of behavior. On other things, yes. And you'll find life stage issues that are different in different parts of the world. But on those 4 kind of what I would call fundamental behavior types, the pattern is universal. It's not just the US and Europe, it's across the whole world.
So we really wonder why many brands don't get it.
Because they haven't thought it through and observed it, and they're relying mostly on their own intuition, and most of them are men, which is why you end up with nobody solving the hotel problem until finally one does. That's the issue. Most people are drawing on their own experience, and if most of those people are men, they're going to create experiences on the internet that are going to work for men, which is why it's very easy to find lots of good examples of stuff for men in marketing on the internet, and extremely hard to find really great examples for women.
Right. So we have 3 minutes and 1 second, and there is opportunities for questions. Hello? Anyone? There must be questions. Yes. Thank you, Christine. So I'll just give you my.
Thank you. I just like to connect this panel with that about fashion, because I think when you target women, it seems to be a stereotype, I know, but I think fashion is more self-expression than ever. It's not so important the car you drive or how you have styled your apartment, but fashion is the main target. So what can we do, or what do you want to do to target women better in fashion? Because I think this is a point they already knew, or is internet the future?
You go.
So one of the things we did when we did our survey is we asked about satisfaction with categories and involvement in different categories, and we also asked women about their happiness level. And one of the things that we saw is women's attitude toward fashion and apparel changes over time. So when you're young and single, you have more time to shop, and you actually enjoy the process of going out and shopping for apparel. If you actually plot women's apparel spend and fashion spend, in the 12 months after a woman has a child, her apparel spend falls off the map. It just plummets. And part of that is because she doesn't have time to go and shop. She maybe doesn't wear the same size she did before. It's not a pleasant experience. And you see it come back up once the kids go to school and she has a little more time. It exactly tracks. But what's interesting is that women that are engaged in the category that spend more on fashion, that spend more on beauty, one of the things that really surprised us is those women that are highly engaged in those categories are happier, more optimistic women than women that are not engaged in the categories. And now, we can't exactly tell you what the causality is from it, but we did a lot of qualitative interviews, and it's exactly that. It's the self-expression. It's the creativity that comes out of putting something together. It's also an investment in yourself. Women put their partner, their children, everyone before themselves, but fashion and beauty is the one thing that you do for yourself, and is that self-expression that women are looking for.
I mean, if I could just add to it, I think the most important thing that you can do is really observe how people behave. It's much more valuable than asking them what they think or what they feel. And then if you can find ways to take existing patterns of behavior and make it faster, easier, better, or cheaper, it will be successful. And a lot of what was discussed in the fashion session was about how the blog helped people do what they already were doing, but with more people, faster, more often. That's how the internet can really help.
Well, thank you very much, everyone on stage. This has been a great session. Thank you, audience.